Conacy, how are ye? Welcome to the Candlelit Tales podcast. I am sitting here in a beautiful, hermetically sealed sound recording booth, and Aaron, my brother, is where are you actually?
Uh, I'm in an outdoor space. I'm going to call it a shared workspace that looks, if you're seeing this on YouTube, like a tin roof on the side of the street. And you might hear the sound of my fellow colleague working over there in the workspace on another call. Um, I'm in the south of India, and I'm in the province of Kerala, and I'm near a hilltop station called Munnar. And I'm doing a bit of hiking around here after doing some Ayurvedic treatments down south
Mm.
to do some, energy unblocking. Honestly, the main reason I did it is because I over yoga'd, I messed up my shoulder, elbow, and now I can't do vinyasas. So I was like, oh, I have to do something. So,
Mm.
you know,
So
after
did
over
it
yogaing,
did it
I do
work? Or
too much yoga.
are you going to go from too much yoga to too much Ayurveda?
I ran away from the Ayurveda and I went to the hills.
Too much altitude?
Um,
What
yeah,
what extreme can you fling yourself to next so that you have an overall feeling of balance at least while you are in motion between extremes is my question.
um, it's a really good question. I'm actually not sure. I'm kind of trying to find that out, to be honest. I did swim in a waterfall yesterday, and I think
Hmm.
I'm in an extreme of tea right now. I'm in an extremely abundant area of tea growing,
That's a
which
good
is like,
extreme though. That's good. Mhm.
well, any monoculture is not great, to be honest, but
I
like it's
know,
just a
but
lot of tea.
a lot
It's
of
a
tea.
lot of tea. The hills are just like, and also, yeah, India is just, I mean, this particular part of India is just beautiful.
Mm.
It's called God's own country. So it's very, very pretty. And
Wow.
there's actually signs here saying don't litter, which is really nice to see because
Okay.
there's a lot of
Not a
litter
thing you
here.
see a lot in
Yeah, it's
you
in
see
this
a lot
part
of
of the
litter.
country.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, part of the world. So yeah, that's where I am,
Good.
and hopefully
And like,
the audio won't be too annoying on my end. But like I
yeah,
said, we're going to be mainly
apologies.
talking about you and your
Apologies. Well,
story this month.
I've been doing most of the Candlelit Tale stuff while you've been in India, so that's kind of been
Thank
the
you.
deal for the last while. You're welcome. You'll pay me back when you get back. I plan to
Exactly.
do nothing for about 6 months.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
in
That won't
fairness,
be
as
possible.
we are talking about that, the last time you were here, I had a job. I had a part-time job, so I did not have a lot. I did not have as much capacity for Candlelit Tale stuff. So you were kind of carrying that a bit more intensely for the last kind of year and a half previous to that. Um, so hopefully when you come
Hence the
back,
reason I ran away. Hence
we
the
will.
reason I ran away.
Yeah, well, like I said, you were careening between extremes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm
Too much
extreme.
work,
I've got,
too
I've
much to
gotten
do.
to that point now. I've gotten to that point now where I'm like, all right, I've had a bit too much leisure now. I'm like, I was down at the
Uh,
beach in Varkla. I was like, this is beautiful. But it's, I don't know. There's a lot of walking around. Like, if I can do yoga every day, and it was great. Then I was doing yoga and surfing, and that's how I messed up my
um,
elbow. And it's just like,
yes, the
right. And
elbow,
I can't. I also can't surf.
famously
So,
really important for when you're standing on a surfboard. Although I suppose falling into the
oh no,
water is
no,
very.
you
Oh no, you're
fucking
pushing up. You're
you
doing
push
much
yourself
push-ups.
up.
That's true.
So,
That's
and
true.
like
I didn't
in
think of
my
that.
case, I was doing a lot of push-ups and falling off. So less standing on the board, but I was just
That
pushing
makes
myself up lots of
that
times,
makes so
lots and lots
much
of times.
sense.
Yeah.
Actually,
Um.
that's great.
So yeah,
Um,
I was hoping to actually try and finally be able to, surf a little bit because everyone thinks I'm a surfer, because of
I
long
mean,
hair,
you have
and
the aesthetic.
I have the aesthetic down. Hence the reason I like acting. I like
Yeah,
looking
yeah,
like
yeah.
stuff and not actually doing the thing that I look like doing. I've always liked to sound
You
like I know what I'm talking about.
you got the puka shell necklace and the long hair and the like, yeah, tan and all that kind of stuff. And yeah. No, I get it. You look like a surfer, and then they actually put you on a surfboard and you fall over immediately. That's great.
Immediately. I mean, it's really hard. It's really hard. It's fucking hard,
I
man.
have
And I
I
hate
have done
doing stuff I'm not
surfing
good at.
one time. Uh, you were there. It was in Cork. I don't think I stood up at all.
Was I?
Yeah, you were there. There's a photo of me in a wetsuit, and there's also a photo of you and Neil in wetsuits. It was all of us were there. Other
Oh yeah,
people were there
I
as well.
remember
I
that.
don't remember who else was
You were all
there,
there.
but I know the three of us were there. I know. I
Yeah,
also
yeah,
know
yeah.
that
In Barleycorp. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I didn't attempt to stand up because I understood my limitations.
See, I can stand up. It's just like as long as the board is like basically a boat, I can stand up. But I was too cocky. I got a couple of lessons like years ago, and I was like, I've
Yeah,
done the lessons. I don't know.
one of them was in
Give me a
Brigid. I was there.
give me one. Yeah, give me one of those like not so giant boats, boards. Yeah, yeah, and yeah, I was just shite like.
Immediately
So
fell
you
over.
really got to practice on the big boat boards before you even attempt to do anything. Anyway, look, we're getting massively
Anywho,
sidetracked. Um,
are
we're
we?
coming. This is gonna be. I
I
mean,
thought this was the surfing podcast
definitely.
now.
This is not this. That no. So
Is
very
this
happy
not?
to
Is
it.
this not a podcast about the aesthetics of the thing versus the thing itself? I feel like that maybe
Um,
sometimes is a thing.
I,
Um,
I think it's a whole other podcast. I think it's a whole other thing you could
yeah.
do if you want to do
Listen,
it.
I could do a lot of stuff.
Um,
I'm doing a lot of stuff. I'm doing a lot of stuff. Uh, one of the things that
Glad
we
to
have
hear.
been doing, and one of the things, well, like, so in terms of the podcast, we have concluded a series at the end of January, which was the Stories for the Dark, which was great. You got to record some of those stories before you left. The rest of it was I told stories, and we also had a lovely guest story from Daniel Allison from Lore and Legends. And then also, uh, since then, February. This is going to go out at the end of February, around the time when you get back to Ireland. Assuming you're still planning on ever coming back to Ireland, frankly.
I'm on the fence. I'm on the fence.
I know.
Um,
I'm
no, I'm not.
I'm on the other side of the fence.
No, no. I mean, like, I've definitely reached that point where, like, uh, it's so great to do courses and focus on something, and especially like when it's all the strings to bows and like, it's a yoga training course, which basically means I now know fully that I know nothing about yoga,
That's good.
opposed to where before when I was like, oh yeah, I can do yoga. No,
I
um, I mean, it's a lot. It'd be a lifetime commitment to even to get remotely good at teaching, which is
yeah.
a good thing to try and do, I guess. But I guess yeah, it's been interesting to kind of like step fully away from a thing and a passion and a love, and like the times I get most animated is when I'm actually talking about going back, telling stories and kind of tales and performing. It's like, oh, and that love and that yearning. So like it's lovely to be away from it and have that break, but also
Hmm.
it's kind of it reflects on like, oh yeah, that thing I needed to kind of just get away from admin and get away from the busyness of it all.
Nobody likes
And
that part of it, man.
nobody likes that part of it. And it's just the juggling of three or four different jobs in the creative sector anyway that is just exhausting. Um, so I mean, it's nice to be able to step away and hey, I'm fucking grateful to be able to be here. And I'll actually be probably linking up with Daniel Allison in person soon. So yeah, hopefully we might have another uh, um, podcast that we'll be doing for Lore and Legends coming out on his podcast. So I'll probably record that with him when I do meet up with him. But I'll be back recording podcasts very soon, and I have been thinking about a couple of stories I might do, and I'll talk to you afterwards about what they were. And it's been nice as well to listen to your Brigid story, and from
Mm.
this end, and kind of like just think about what you're going to be doing with it, the live shows you're doing that I very, very nearly came home to do
Well,
just because I wanted to do them with you.
to be clear, they are in the future as we are recording this, and as you are listening to this, oh listener, they are in the past.
Oh no, I'm sorry. Um, let's not mention live shows anymore.
Well, like, no, we can talk about because there's going to be some live shows coming up in February because we are going to be working with in March because we're working with
Mm,
the St. Patrick's Day Festival. So we have
St.
we
Patrick's
have
Day
two
Festival,
confirmed shows at the St. Patrick's Day Festival, which is nice, on the 17th
which
and
is
the
going to be
18th.
great fun.
It was lovely.
Yeah.
So that'll kind of be they may be your first shows when you come back, or we may do some other stuff between when you are listening to this now, dear listener, and then. But that's a month in the future.
Dear listener, we're really sorry for like being really
We're
bad at dates, time continuums,
I'm
and
not
organization.
sorry. It's made up.
It's not a real
It
thing.
doesn't. mean anything. And the sooner everyone gets used to that, the better for me personally.
I mean, it is very useful, you know,
It is,
in
it has a certain utility in terms of organizing different people to turn up at the same, like on at the same location in a
mm,
temporarily
mhm.
coincidental way.
And stuff like transport and, you know,
You got it.
um,
I
so many,
understand.
many things,
I
many
understand
things.
it's a utility. I'm just saying that in a wider sense it doesn't exist. Like so many constructs that we have made up to make society a little bit easier.
Look, there is only
If people
now.
take it
There
too
is
fucking
only now.
seriously, then you know I get into trouble because I don't.
Well, you know what? Like, it is kind of funny, even like being away from, uh, the regular routine of whatever that kind of is in my life, which isn't very regular anyway.
No, I was gonna say
Like
what
the
routine.
the unusualness. Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I have some form of routine. Um, but like actually being over here and not having, I guess, a link into things happening at certain stages, but also a kind of a time away from and a time out of and a time, a lot of it is quite meditative here. There's so many ashrams. There's so many beautiful, really deep in it.
You cut out there for me, and I don't know if that's gonna be also a cutout on the recording.
Spiritual areas. I was talking too much. Yeah, yeah, probably.
Um, it's fine.
I mean,
Um,
this is why I said I shouldn't talk because
you
anyway,
did, and then
all I
you
was saying
proceeded to talk a lot.
a lot. And look, my simple point was, there's only now. We imagine a future and we imagine a past, and when we're in the imaginary future, it's just silly, and when we're in the imaginary past, it's also silly. But what's nice about those imaginary things is when they're in story, and that's what's the nice
that
chewing gum for the brain.
that was a nice
That was my
segue
point.
into let's talk about the Brigid story a little bit, I guess, because that's the story
Yeah.
that we were able to bounce that a little bit. In that I sent you a kind of a planned recording, and then you sent me your notes on it, and then I went into the studio and recorded it, and have also will have finished by this time performing in the Lexicon and in the Roscommon Bridges Day Festival, which is happening which is hopefully going to be an annual thing. So you know what? Now that you're listening to that, think about next year, Bridget's Day. Stuff will be happening. Um, but we'll probably be doing stuff
And
after.
our mother's painting got put up on
Yeah,
um, walls and
yeah.
buildings and castles.
Her story, lighting projections. She was one of the artists that they featured, so that was very nice. She was delightful.
MariaMcGee.ie if you want to check out some
Yeah.
interesting, amazing art.
Follow her on
Hopefully she has it.
Instagram. Um,
Um,
yeah. So the Bridget story was kind of a notion that I've been kicking around since December about like reconciling the goddess and the saint, because there is that the folkloric tradition really has more to do with the saint in Ireland, but she is supposed to have been like named after a goddess. Dot dot dot.
yeah, so this is a really interesting. Like I love listening to your story and your take on it, and I can only imagine how brilliant it will be and was live. I like this. Um,
See, it's
so
fun.
it is fun. Oh, time. I I love it because obviously Imbolc is like just the start of some life coming back into the land, a little bit of light coming back into the place. There's some form of need to celebrate a resurgence, and the goddess of spring essentially is what she is. And I guess, when we've talked about Brigid before, we found her either a goddess or either a saint. And so this story really makes it links those as, you know, what when you get in trouble of naming a thing and making it too specific a thing, like what is it? Like what is Bridget? You know, like if we're actually getting trying to like label something, you kind of lose the essence of it. And this
Yeah,
is nice because
and
you're
I
linking these two ideas.
it is part of my continued interest in sort of like looking at binaries and seeing how those can be collapsed or transcended, and like where is the space where is the tension in between that is more interesting than the edge of either thing. Because I think that's like when we get really into binary thinking, like there's a certain amount of binary thinking that you need to do. Again, it's like time, it's like watches, it's like showing up to a place. There's a certain amount of it that you kind of need to function in the world. But in essence, these are all like illusory. Like there's no binaries in nature, they're all spectra. Um, so it's interesting to me to kind of look at somebody who is, there is a binary choice about Brigid that's usually presented. Is this Saint Brigid or is this Goddess Brigid? And what kind of, it was building on some of the goddess sort of storytelling that we have done over the last couple of years, where goddess can be quite vague. And I was like, well, what if that's kind of the point of goddess, is that the goddess is not something that is written down and pinned down and very, very definite, but that goddess energy is mutable and constantly changing and constantly in flux, and therefore isn't something that actually can be pinned down and is constantly renewing itself, which is a sort of a way of looking at the kind of construction of goddess anyway, that I think kind of works. And then if that, then Saint Brigid would seem to me to be a very good example of a goddess reinventing herself for another, you know, a new framework. And then it kind of collapses that duality of Brigid Saint versus Brigid Goddess into Brigid, Brigid. What if both?
One and the same. And also, what jumped to my mind when listening to it is like, what if not before and what if not again? Like, okay, sure, we have the saint that is remembered, and how many bridges were there? How many he took on that role? How many have, you know, stepped into that? And like, what is she but somebody who puts, who abandons, I guess, in a way, like she abandons not just men, not just like sexuality, but like, she prioritizes, it's a monastic life basically, and prioritizing the welfare of others far and above hers, and through sheer devotion. And you've lots of stories of throughout cultures of the most devoted in Hindu mythology. It's Hanuman, the little monkey god,
Mm-hmm.
the devoted, and the one that like lasts the longest. And yeah, I think that's kind of like the how many are there and how many can there be as well.
Yeah, and like I think there's something about, for me, when I was looking at the story, because you gave me a really good note on that, which was that like after she leaves her father's house, there needs to be a down moment before she steps on to you know, creating the abbey and founding the
Yeah,
abbey.
crisis.
There needs to be a moment of crisis. So I was like, okay, well then she's homeless. She's alone. She has nothing, because the whole kind of thing with the early church was that the early church was not accepting of women. It was a very male dominated space. And she had to make a space. And so that kind of struck me as like, well, what if she just sort of spent some time among the outcasts, because she is in stories always working with lepers and working with outcasts and working with, the pregnant nun who she has a miraculous abortion for. Like she's taking in the people who don't fit. She's taking in the people who don't have a place. So like if you put that onto a kind of a modern map, she's taking in the people who don't conform. She's taking in all the people who are like rejected by a society and who don't have a space because of their gender or their gender presentation, because of their race, because of their whatever it is that people are being rejected for. She's going out and she is finding a space among those people, and then she's creating a space where those people are welcome. And I think that was more interesting to me than it being like a convent for women, because she's also a goddess who is like a protector of the victims of domestic violence. And like, sure, we know that a lot of the time that's women, but it's not always women. There are people in sex couples who experience domestic violence. There are men in heterosexual couples who experience domestic violence. But like having that be like, again, taking the binary out of it a bit and making it more, I think that makes it richer. I think it makes it more interesting as a story, and I think it makes it more interesting as a space to explore. And to your point about how many, like, that was the thing with the Abbess of Kildare. Brigid became a title rather than a name. So the Abbess of Kildare was known as the Brigid, which again gets into that thing of like constant renewal and renewing by changing, renewing by being reborn.
Yeah, and I guess that's kind of my point, is like many have put on the cloak and have taken up the mantle and have been like doing that and can still do that, and like, but it's the power of being that selfless. Like, it's so easy to describe it. It's so easy to talk about it. But like what she gives up I mean, she's pretty miraculous in how easy it comes to her, and she doesn't expect anything back. And that's why like it's so beautiful as a child when
but she
her
does.
parents don't understand what she's doing. She's giving everything away.
But she does. This is what I think is
Does
really
she know? But like
interesting
she's not
about her.
she doesn't expect
No,
it.
hang on.
I don't think she expects it or demands it back.
She absolutely demands it back. Give me salt.
Well, in that story, she's just asking for kindness.
She always does. She absolutely demands that it be paid on and that it be paid forward. And she absolutely punishes those who are ungenerous. So I think there's a really interesting thing in there.
Yeah,
about there's a really interesting thing in there about selfish and selfless in the way that you're putting it, because it's not an egoic selfishness. But she absolutely does not fucking put up with being mistreated. And I think that's a really important distinction, because I think there's a version of her that's a doormat. And that's a version that I think is very much taught in the kind of Christian tradition of like, the way to be in service is to never assert yourself and to like wash everybody else's feet and kowtow and like never put yourself forward and always be silent and always be of service and always be like self-effacing and hiding. And that's not what she does. She is extremely assertive of what she deserves.
What she believes in. Yeah.
She will give away everything, but she 100% demands that you also do that, because otherwise you don't get to be in her presence.
Yeah, and well, that's the key difference. I mean, so like what I mean is, she doesn't expect any egoic reward for her sacrifice.
Yeah,
like she doesn't expect for herself to be raised on a pedestal, and she's not looking for any.
Yeah, she's not interested in status in that way, but she also is high status. Like she becomes high status. But it's not a self-denial thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of an interesting one, because again, as a child, when her parents are kind of shocked that she keeps on giving their stuff away, and then they slowly realize, they're like, "Stop it, kid," and then slowly, they realize, "Oh, hang on, this is actually kind of, she seems to be able to walk her own line here, and things are coming back tenfold." And okay, let's get her just married, because that's the thing to do. And when she takes a firm, like, I love the fact that she just makes herself ugly and gets your man a beautiful woman out in the woods and talk sweet words to her, and she'll love whatever she says to you, or you say to her.
Whatever you say to her will sound she's like pearls of wisdom to both her and her father.
So she already has a kind of a magical element to her in this story. Like, she already has like kind of a magic to her. Like, she has the ear of God. She has the kind of the ability to kind of
got some kind of inside
expect
line,
that she's yeah, she's like, you, whatever you say that over there, it will be good. And is it the placebo effect? Is it, your man goes, great, I'm now gifted. I can talk whatever I can, and she's like, yeah, sure, cool.
Hmm.
And she might be one of those bright-eyed kind of like almost whatever you think is going to happen will probably happen. But if I say it with sheer and utter conviction,
Yeah,
then you will believe it.
you'll believe it.
And through her conviction, like she kind of manifests everything. And like that's one of the key things I think in the story is like her belief in herself, her
Yes,
belief in the higher power and the greater good,
yeah.
and her belief that it will be if she puts everything into it, how she wants it, and then it is. And like
Hmm.
that's kind of true of most great whatever success stories. Like it's sheer will, determination, and focus. You like, and that's
Yes,
a lot of the time.
I have a little bit of a problem with the, great man theory of history because I think there are very few individuals who are actually succeeding on their own. It's usually about they have inspired a community of people who also agree with them and who support them and help them. You get very few. If you look into any of the great people of history, there's a huge number of people around them
I
supporting them.
mean, yeah, of course. I mean, I'm kind of just even looking at like at Brigid being like, okay, she gathered a community to her, and then she got her status. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that's how like you don't you don't gain status on your own.
Yeah.
You need a community of people. So like, although she was devout and had this great magical kind of power, um, which again, I love the fact that she has that hard edge to her with the salt. She turns into rocks, and she, I guess, is linked to this. How you put it in the story is not dividing between the saint who we know kind of these stories from and the goddess of old, and linking them as like a rebirth and a renewal and something that's there. And she's kind of whispered to herself from a power from long ago, which is maybe slightly darker. Maybe was it darker then,
I
and is
don't
it?
think dark and
And
light
that's
is
kind of.
to me dark and light is another one of those like binaries that get us in trouble. Like
But that's what the Catholic Church got in trouble. I think the Catholic
exactly.
Church got itself in trouble for
Yeah.
being too binary. Like,
Yeah.
and that's what I think is beautiful is because she feels, oh, this is dark, but my new religion says it's you should be light and only happy, and I don't feel light and happy all the time, and so actually that doesn't really compute, and
Well, like
like
interestingly,
she's on the edge.
it's not so much be happy all the time as it is like, it doesn't matter how much you suffer in this life because you will go to heaven in the next life. Like you can suffer picturesquely in this life because you get your reward in the afterlife. So this life is less important. Um,
Hmm.
which again I think is a an interesting one for her because I don't think she lives by that. I think she lives by
No,
this life is important and these people who are here are important and just taking care of ourselves and others is important. And that's kind of how she acts.
yeah,
But yeah, the
yeah,
Brigid.
and I mean, sorry, on that last point, and like it's important what you do in this world and how you act. Like if you're not kind, like the king was a great example, the kind of king
mm,
who kind of scoffs at her and then
King of
she throws her
Leinster.
cloak, and like, he's not a generous guy, but he becomes kind of almost afraid of her.
Mm.
Um, and the guy with the salt and or who
The guy who.
gets crushed under rocks,
Yep.
which I love as well because he's mean. He's not generous, and it's like
Hmm.
the worst thing you can be around
Hmm.
a goddess or a saint.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, to be ungenerous or in someone who prizes generosity, but I think like the generosity for me was the connecting point as well between the two of them because generosity in like Celtic society and in older Irish society, pre-Christian Irish society was like so important because it was part of your way of showing status. It was part of your way of like being was to be generous. Like if you think of the Fianna stories and the Oisin Patrick stories, like to be generous, to be hospitable, to let everybody in, regardless of who they were and what their status was like
Yeah, absolutely.
hugely valued. So it was kind of interesting that like that's her through line is her generosity, but her
Yeah.
generosity is the generosity of nature, which is like, you know, it multiplies upon itself. Um, anyway, that's Brigid.
So come
I
here.
feel like we could talk
Well,
about
it's not.
Brigid all day, but I don't want to because I
Yeah.
also want to talk
Well,
about the other stories
I
I
don't
told
want to either, but I briefly want to ask you because it's it's the first time we've had a national holiday celebrating the goddess Brigid, even though I'm not sure it's like technically a Brigid celebration day because it's the 6th of February. Was the
first.
bank holiday?
No, it's,
Um.
well, it's the 6th this year, but it's going to be the first Monday in February
Oh, okay.
because the
Sorry.
bank holiday has to fall on
Um.
a Monday. But yeah, no, we had there have been a group of people campaigning for Brigid's Day to be a national holiday for the past 3 or 4 years. And it was announced last year. And it was justified by our current government as being in gratitude for the healthcare workers during the pandemic, which I think is a very good and worthy reason for a bank holiday going forward. Uh, we also have way less bank holidays than other countries in Europe. And also, this had been campaigned for by a group of very dedicated activists for several years before that. So, which is was not mentioned. So it was a little bit it was a little bit of a cop out there. But I also think like that's a good reason for a bank holiday. I don't really mind that that's what they said about it to get it over the line. But I do think the contributions of the herstory group should probably be acknowledged.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think it's like it's still a kind of a win. It's still a kind of
It's still a
a
win. It's still a win.
yeah, yeah.
We did
And
have a conversation with Melanie from Her Story on this podcast, which is in. I will find out what episode that was and stick it in the show notes if anyone is interested in listening to us chat to
yeah,
her.
absolutely. Very briefly, sir, I just want to ask you, what are the main attributes of Bridget, like character-wise? What do you
Uh,
think, like as a person, as a human being, or a goddess, or a being with such power?
I think if you are to try and distill her down into a very short list of characteristics, generosity is the main one, and compassion. Uh, and I think it's generosity and compassion, but it's also there is also a very strong boundary around like uh paying that generosity forward. She will give you infinite compassion as long as you are also compassionate. She will give you infinite
Mhm.
generosity as long as you are also infinite. But she is not um it's a weird thing where like her initial love is unconditional, but if you do not show that you will also pay it forward, it very quickly becomes conditional. And like there's the story of the lepers, uh, where they're told to bathe each other, and one bathes the other and heals him, and then the healed leper refuses to touch the leper who bathed him and gets leprosy again. Like she uh, or the woman with the apple trees who gives her apples, and when Brigid gives them all away, and this woman gives out to her tree is blighted; it doesn't give fruit anymore. So there's a kind of a thing of like that's what I mean by she. I don't think she's like I don't think
Oh yeah, no.
she's not the fucking giving tree. Like you can't if you try and take an axe to this woman, she will cut you down. Um, so
And we
there's something
still like,
really interesting about that to me in terms of like she has incredibly good boundaries.
mhm.
Like she is a goddess of boundaries because she's like you can have this and then it's this far and no further and we're fucking done here. But she
Interesting.
is also like one of her like that's her big thing is like that ripple effect of good deed leading to good deed leading to good deed, generosity leading to more generosity, that's a kind of a like a positive feedback loop because it is. And if you are in a culture where that positive feedback loop is going on and somebody starts to behave uh, ungenerously or selfishly, they can really fuck it up for everybody else. So
Yeah.
she really fucks that person up.
And I mean,
So she's
saint
an
stories.
interesting guardian of her community in that way, where it's like we can be based on infinite generosity as long as everyone is fucking agreeing. You know?
Yeah, yeah. And it's interesting to me that, like, okay, so we still have, every kid in primary school still makes the Brigid crosses out of reeds, and they're
Mm.
all over the place. And it's a fantastic solar cross, of course, rather than the Catholic one. So like you still have the combination of Catholicism mixed in with paganism, even if it's like completely unbeknownst. And it's it's the link, and it's one and the same. It's kind of both as well. And I mean, the stories you picked out, they're all saint stories, and
But
yet
there
they
are no
hark
goddess
back
stories,
to
Aaron.
exactly, yeah.
Like there are no
To
there are
those,
there like that was kind of the story. The only story of of a goddess called Brigid that survives is the story of the first Guinea. And the rest of the stories of Brigid, we have no idea when they came up. We have no idea when they started.
hmm.
Outside of the childhood ones, which are definitely like saint childhood stories, like we don't have any way of pulling that apart.
All right,
And
guys, thank you very much for listening. I
yeah,
hope my audio isn't terrible. I'll be back telling stories soon-ish. And yeah, thanks for keeping it going, Circa. Just keeping it lit.
until then, you can help us keep it lit on patreon.com/candlelit. Or if you don't want to, you don't have to. Bye.